Okay, so we just finished a color wheel exercise where we did the primary colors in both warm and cool, and then we made the secondaries also in warm and cool. So now, to get used to using these colors and using the tempera paints a little bit, I think we'll go ahead and we'll just do a simple little painting. So this is on the smaller paper, and if you'll see, I worked out my idea on a piece of scratch paper, always a good idea. And I also wanted to talk about the elements of design again. We talked about that a lot with the initial drawings, but people often don't know exactly how to go about starting a drawing. Well, first off, you have to start with an idea, of course, right? But how do you execute it? Well, remember, first you have line. Line which separates one thing from another, right? Line. That line then becomes a shape. That shape becomes a form through value, which denotes a light source and makes that form more readable. Okay. The surface is then described by the texture. So how rough or how smooth that would be is the texture. In this case, I guess we'll figure that it's kind of smooth. And then where you locate that, that would be the space. What we're talking about more now than we did before is color. So how do you color that in? And that is, in essence, your drawing. So I made a very simple drawing this time, just my little caterpillar and with some flowers there. Okay, you make whatever you want, please. But when you're going to make something, just think about how easy it is to break it down. We've got lines that make shapes, and we're going to add the values with the paint, and we're going to describe the surface as texture, and where we put things, that's space. Okay, well, good enough. Speaking of lines, you'll notice that I've got some line that is very dark, but this other side is filled in too. And I did that on purpose. Now, I did these dark to show that you could have a painting style that is very illustrative and has a lot of strong outlines. Sure, no problem. The other way that you could do it, though, is that all your definition could come from the paint, in which case you'd want very light lines. Here you might barely be able to see these. Let me just show you real quick how I went about drawing some of these simple flowers, right? Just as sort of a lesson. So for instance, I've got this flower right up here. And I started out just thinking, okay, I'm going to have the center of my flower, right? And that is my shape right there. Then I figured, well, the structure of the flowers oftentimes look good with, let's say, an odd number of petals. And the easiest odd number of petals to put in would be 5. So I'll draw a little guideline. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And in that way, I can line up my petals, because then I can go around here and here, 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 and here. That helped me to get my spacing on my petal by having these lines. Now, for this, I'd probably go ahead and erase the lines. I wouldn't have drawn the lines as dark as this to begin with, especially if something is a guideline. It'd been lighter like it was when you first saw it. The leaf, I'm just using sort of a nice symbolic leaf shape and giving it just that much more detail just by drawing the center section of it. No big deal. Just like that. Okay, easy peasy. Well, fine. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of painting. Now, I still see in the classroom where kids are getting like way too many brushes. Here, I'm going to get myself one kind of medium-sized brush, not real big because it's not a real big painting, and one kind of smaller brush. And we'll see if I even end up using this one. Okay, starting with my medium-sized paintbrush, I'm going to go ahead and here's my palette. And it's got my warm and cool colors. So I've got a cool blue and a warm blue. I've got a cool yellow and a warm yellow. I've got a cool red and a warm red. And I'm just going to mix and match these in any sort of experimental way and see what I come up with. Here, I think I'll move this over a little bit. Move this over here so you can see my palette. Cool. All right. When painting, you want to start with the thing that's furthest back. So I'm going to paint my background first. That way, if I don't like something that's going on with my background, or if I get some into my picture, that's okay. I have a chance to cover it up. Okay, I think I changed my mind. I'm going to keep this painting right in the middle. I have a tendency to hold my palette here. So now I just wanted to show you something real quick, right? Okay, when you're painting with these paints, the brush strokes really matter because when you're painting with a paint that has some body, the brush strokes are really going to show, even a lot more than with the watercolor. So as I'm painting them, I want to kind of vary my strokes or smooth them off or whatever, right, to get rid of an unwanted texture. The other thing with a brush, right, that's really kind of nice is that you can take a big brush and manipulate it to make it work into a small area with one single stroke, or at least a limited number of strokes. Watch this. So right here, I've got this area around here. What I can do is I can push down more to cover a larger area. So I'm pushing that down, flattening out the bristles, and taking and releasing the pressure as I come up. So once again, here, like a little area like this right here, can come in here and manipulate that brush, right? Let me get it so you can see it there. And really bending that around. You see how I was able to make the brush fit the area that I wanted it to work into. Another thing too, I've talked about the magic white line so much. To avoid that magic white line, here, instead of stroking like this to get next to something, if you use the bristle tips like this, that will help you get to places a lot better. And once again, if I get into my main sort of thing, kind of like I did like right over here, it's no big deal because I've done the background first. I'll probably be able to cover that up. Well, another thing that I wanted to mention was that I saw some students diligently wetting their paper as we were working with the tempera paints. I would not suggest that. That was a watercolor thing, right? All paints are different and they're going to work in different ways, right? And so they were sort of needlessly soaking out their paper and making it all sort of weak and ripply and stuff like that when they didn't need to. Generally speaking, with the tempera paints, I would not get any water on my paper first. I would just go for it dry, just like this. Okay, so I've got this all covered in one layer of blue, and it's really good because when you see the color, then you can really start seeing the drawing underneath it. In other words, all the shapes that you have in all the open spaces. By the way, it was really important to leave these open spaces where some blue could come through. All right, so now these paints that we're using, these tempera paints, these are semi-transparent, right? So the amount of paint that you put on versus the amount of white from the paper that shows through is really going to make a difference into how dark or how light that color is. All right, so here, I'm going to go ahead and just give it a little second layer, at least in some of the areas. And that way, it can kind of just sort of even things out a little bit or darken things up. But because of the fact that I have varied my strokes, in other words, those strokes are going different directions, I don't mind the fact that they're not all perfect and that the color is not perfectly flat. I'm not really going for that. Not with these paints, not with this paper. But what I wouldn't probably like is a stroke that just went around or just was, okay, let's fill in some of this area, then this way for this area. That was just sort of arbitrarily following the lines of whatever the drawing was. Right? To me, I wouldn't find that as attractive as randomizing with short brush strokes to get a nice sort of textured background.